But we still have that kind of bouncing ball that's more or less stuck to the board. So what we're going to be doing is working with keyframing the parent relationship. So I mentioned when in the defaults that we're going to go in and play with that weight. So the first thing I want to do is scrub through and my animation and find the release frame. So this is kind of like where, like if this was a cantilever, if the board was a cantilever, where would the sphere kind of like build momentum in its acceleration and then kind of be like thrown from the sphere as the momentum continues for the sphere, but the board is halted because it hits the ground. And so that's kind of like where just before the board is at its kind of peak. It kind of like peaks, hits the ground, kind of loses its momentum, and like at that point, that's when the ball would be released. So I'm going to find that, and I'll maybe go into my side by side so I can kind of see and play through, and it might be like there, like kind of, right like when the board hits the ground for the first time. So it might be like a little bit easier to watch like that. Where does the board hit the ground? Bonk. So that first bounce, bonk, and that's like 60. Yeah, so I'm going to call it at 60. So this is where I'm going to kind of release this sphere. And so the sphere has animation keyframes. As soon as I release the sphere from the parent relationship, it will start kind of moving back into its animation. And that's going to look a little funny for now, but we're going to go in and change that. So we want to select the sphere. On frame 60, you can see the blend parent is 1. And so I'm going, which means 100%. What I want to do is actually, I'm doing this so that we can still slide all of these keyframes in the time slider without going into the dope sheet. And that's primarily because I've been having some issues with the dope sheet in Maya. You could do this in the dope sheet too, but I'm gonna use the slider. So if I had those keyframes in there, it would slide the parenting keyframes with this, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm gonna start my bounce animation on frame 60, and then I'm going to go to 59, and then I'm going to right-click and key selected. So I have it keyed at the parent relationship keyed at 100. And then I'm going to move to frame 60 and change that parent relationship to 0 so that it releases. And then I'm going to say key selected. Maybe, since I started high on this sphere, I'll keep it for now, but what I'm going to be doing is going into the graph editor so that release looks a little bit more natural. So let's play through this so we can kind of see. And that might have been like a little early to release. So what I'm going to do is use the graph editor to change that, kind of soften the relationship between the release pane, the parenting, and I'm going to also use the graph editor to change the bounce and the height. So let's go in and take a look at that now. So with my sphere selected, I'm going to go into my windows and my animation editor and my graph editor. And you can see, oh, maybe that's, yeah. So at frame, we're kind of at frame, it looks like I might have missed a keyframe, which is kind of part of the problem here. So this is my bounce, right? So we start high. Let's see what just moving that one keyframe looks like. There we go, that looks a little bit better. Like more like what I expected. So, so it's still a little, kind of like awkward. So I think what I want to do is like change the, I'm going to use my middle mouse button and option to drag. So I think I want to soften this relationship between that keyframe at 1 for the parent. So this is my blend parent channel. And if I soften that relationship, the board will kind of more slowly release the sphere. That is too much. And all right, let's see what that looks like in combination with this translate Y. So now I want to go in and kind of change the height. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to stop the playthrough, and I'm going to I'm actually going to wait on the height because it looks kind of good. So the next thing that I want to do is actually throw the sphere in the X direction. So I do have some keyframes in my translate. I'm just going to select all of those and then delete them. So I'm going to move to frame, let's see, my first frame. Here I kind of guessed, so let's move this to frame 60. And play through. And let's go back to my blend parent. And it looks like I've lost my one. So let's bring that back up to 100%. It was kind of floating off of the board. There we go. And now I'm going to throw the sphere. So on frame 60, stop. That's that first keyframe where we start releasing. There we go. I want to add a keyframe on my translate X, and I know that I want to move along my X value because I can see the axis key down there. So I'm going to right click on the translate X, and I'm going to key selected. And then I'm going to move to the end of my bounce, which I think would be easier to see down here. Frame 120. And I'm going to scoot the sphere, and this is kind of just like a guess, like how far do I want it to travel, and it's kind of throw, and we'll say about there. I'll kind of preview this after I set the key, and then I'm going to key selected. So that's going to now in my translate X, I can see this is where I start, and then as it's bouncing now, it's kind of traveling, right? And that throw, again, because of this S curve, the way that Maya interpolates between keyframes by default is this kind of S curve, is going to be a little bit artificial, right? We actually want to kind of start this a little bit faster, right? We don't want that kind of slow acceleration in, because it's actually going to start the fastest and kind of slow down. So I'm going to weight the tangents, and then I'm going to free tangent length, and for some reason, my Maya doesn't keeps unallowing me to select tangents. So I'm going to go in and reset that. And then let's see. Yeah, so that just previewing that little kind of ball bounce looks pretty good. So let's press play and see what it looks like with the animation. Okay, so I like that. So I'm going to zoom in here to my graph editor. So I've increased my frame 150. I'm on 250. I've increased the bounce time so that it takes approximately 200 frames. The bounce takes 200 frames, and I just did that using the scale function. So with the translate Y, if I box select all of the keyframes, I can go into edit and I can go into scale, and then if I hold down my middle mouse button, and click and drag, I can change the scale. So that will make things happen time more compressed or kind of time longer, right? So that's how I changed the scale, and then I just kept futzing around with the curves, kind of gave more space in between that first bounce so that it kind of, you know, lobs, the throw kind of lobs. And then the blend parent, the blend parent, I just want that one, and translate Y. It's gonna, whatever, it won't let me. Kind of like subtly shifts over these kind of a couple frames, and then the biggie is going in and messing around with that throw, so the translate X, and kind of using the handles to adjust the acceleration of the kind of distance that it travels, and kind of correlating that with the bounce. So this is what I came up with, and that I'm pretty happy with, so that it looks a little bit more natural.